All right, I'd like to call this meeting of the Marquette City Planning Commission to order. This meeting on Tuesday, January 7th, 2025 is 6:03, and we'll begin with roll call. Wayne, do you want to start us off?
Wayne Pringle here.
Margaret Rayner here.
Dallas Hunter here. Jim Ficken here. Christine Hunter here.
Steve Laurie here.
Alex Wilkinson here.
And Kevin Clegg is here. Is there a motion to approve the agenda as presented? Oh,
Minutes.
Minutes.
Chair. Minutes first.
Minutes? I've got that as 3.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. Yeah, you can.
I have a chart that I'd like to add to item number 7A under training. So just accompanying the article. So it's just a formality, but just to let you know, the official agenda would have this added chart for our site plan review for 2024. And then
All right, is there anybody willing to make a motion with that amendment?
I move we accept the agenda as amended.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. All right, we've got 2 separate minutes to approve by consensus. Did anybody see any problems with either of those sets of minutes?
Yeah. On the first set, when I was describing the shrinking Lakeview Arena parking lot, I spoke of encroachments, and it was recorded as encouragements. 2 lines at the bottom of page 3. Twice.
Okay. I'd like to acknowledge that the chair has just walked in, Commissioner Middlefeld. I'll let her get settled and then we'll hand over. Something that I saw in the second set of minutes was that it was a transcription error regarding the cost of the building for one of the bids. It's like 6, 7, 100,000, and it should just read 6 to 700,000 for when Tina was describing the cost of the project. I do not remember what page.
It's the top of page 13 in their packet.
Okay.
Steve, you said the encroachments.
It's at the bottom of page 3.
Okay.
So the 2 bottom lines.
Are there any other additions or changes to either of the sets of minutes? All right, seeing consensus, I will pass off to our chair.
Awesome. Thank you, Commissioner Clegg. Sorry I'm late. So it looks like we're on number 4 here. Any conflicts of interest for the cases? Or where we're on?
Oh yeah, conflict. Yes.
I don't think we have any cases tonight, so let's not apply. We have no public hearings, so we'll go to number 2, citizens wishing to address the commission on any agenda items. All right, seeing none, we have no old business. We have no new business. Are there any citizens wishing to address the commission on any non-agenda items? No. Okay, thank you for just showing up for fun. We have no correspondence, reports, or anything. The training article, I think, Dave, is that just a refresher about sort of our responsibilities?
So some of you have seen this twice, so this will be the second time you've seen this. And I thought it'd be good to start off the meeting with something besides the LDC amendments. And we could also use an update on the site plan review for 2024 into 2025. Andrea prepared a chart that she'll bring up so that we can go over this, but it's related to the article, which was published in May, June of 22 with the Michigan Planner. So it's a little over 2 years old, and this article actually inspired a change in the code. And so first training thing we'll do here, real training thing, is go to the internet and look at ways, so find us in the LDC. So on the city's homepage, again, right at the very bottom of the page for a few years now, they've had this little box where you can go to the LDC portal. You can also get to it through the departments drop down for the zoning page. So there's this other link there. So once you get into that, I want to go to this section that deals with what we changed related to this article. And this is more or less for the benefit of those of you who haven't heard this before. But under the, what is this section 14?
14 site plan review.
Site plan review. So it shows you what the conditions or the criteria are for different site plan review. Who reviews what's considered required to be reviewed by the planning commission, and then what is administratively reviewed. Based on recommendations in this article and our own recommendations, the planning commission didn't always do site plan review here. I think there was a long period of time before the planning commission ever started doing site plan review. It was all done administratively for a while, and then it was changed to where the planning commission did a lot of site plan review. And kind of going back to what this article is recommending, staff proposes change to the code to, I don't know if you can zoom in on the standards for PC review, but we changed this pretty dramatically a couple of years ago, so that now the planning commission reviews site plans only when the conditions are, it's either a special land use, a PUD, planned unit development, or a new building with the construction totaling more than either 16,000 square feet in footprint area or 40,000 square feet in gross floor area. So that's a fairly big area, fairly big project. And then new construction for residential units, multifamily units that will contain 20 or more than 20 dwelling units, or site condominium development. So we've had site plans in all those categories and alterations to structures that are more than 16,000 feet footprint or 40,000 gross floor area. We've had site plans kind of in all of those categories, and that's what the chart will go into here, just to update everybody. And this was a promise we made after we, at least staff made the kind of promise to review periodically what site plans have been reviewed, so that you can see what's coming through our office that you don't see, and know what those are. So I did email this to you before the meeting. I didn't think of getting all this into the plan until last week, or into the agenda until last week. And then we got this done today. Andrea got this done today. And so this just, if you open it in your email, or it's pretty hard to read from that distance and on the screen, a lot of text. But this just goes through the list of site plans that have been, like I said, again, reviewed by you all, which is the, not very many compared to the ones that are administratively reviewed. So you haven't reviewed a site plan. Well, you looked at the Y plans were the most recent ones. And we had quite a few others. So you can open that file in your, from the email I just sent, and check it out and ask if you have any questions to ask us. But, so that's just a refresher. This article, it did a good job of explaining why it's maybe not so important for the planning commission to spend a lot of time doing site plan review, because site plan review is really an administrative function, whether you do it or staff does it. But for more consequential projects, it is considered a best practice to have the planning commission conduct the review with a staff, kind of staff analysis of it. And that certainly does present a good look to the community, that the community is involved with those kind of reviews.
Does anyone have any questions for Dave about either the article or the information being presented here? Okay, no questions. Thanks. This was something that the city commission would want to see this at 1.2, just to kind of see how the new breakdown.
I don't know, but they are pretty, so one thing we did before you came in was to work with, when you came in, I asked to add this to the agenda. And I know the city commission has been pretty good about reading our minutes, so, and they do, tend to look at the agendas.
So this would be helpful, I think, piece of information for them, because they can see what we're working with versus what's just being administratively reviewed by staff.
Yeah.
Great, thank you for putting that together. Any other questions about this? Oh, yeah, Commissioner Warren.
I do have one question. We discussed a couple times about some of the projects that were approved with conditions and didn't proceed because they couldn't meet conditions or they were making some change. Are there specific ones on this chart that are, will fall into that category? They just seem to have stalled because of the conditions that were put on them.
Most of the time, it wasn't the conditions, it's because of money that that any of the projects haven't gone through, is because they couldn't afford to build yet.
One that I don't see up there, maybe it predates the start of the chart, as I recall, approving, one for the baker that wanted to live above his shop on Washington Street.
That was a rezoning.
Okay, that was the reason.
He hasn't done any site plan stuff, or
It looks like
it hasn't even done
properties for sale.
interior modeling or anything, yeah. Yeah, I haven't seen any plans on it yet.
Okay.
One bright spot in these is we did have another, a resubmission for the back lot project. And this went back on 200 South Fifth Street. So this was one that was submitted about 4 or 5 years ago to turn the old depot building here on South Fifth Street into a kind of a commercial kitchen and indoor dining area for the winter, with an area outside for food trucks and dining. A lot of remodeling done by Barry Colson, was the architect. That was initially. They had 2 extensions and those had expired, but the owner submitted a new site plan just in late November.
Right.
That.
So that's one of those that they couldn't get the price down to them to develop. The nice thing for them, they said this time around, they didn't have to go to the planning commission. So they were able to submit for admin review. Originally, they had to go to the planning commission.
And I think the new submission included a home on the property.
They ended up adding a duplex on the property.
That they initially had,
Removed,
they had removed it.
because they didn't want to go through that special land use.
So,
All right, any other questions, comments, or?
No, I'm just saying, they removed that because of the fire department. It was too far down for the fire department with no turnaround. So the fire department shut that down.
yeah, I don't think we changed that.
That's a fact.
So is that still moving forward, or is it done on Fifth Street?
They submitted a totally different design and we approved it administration.
All All right, any other questions or comments about this? Ready to move on to our work session? Okay, well, let's dive into our land development code amendments. There's quite a few of them in here, so. Here, Andrew, you want to kick us off and we'll kind of walk through?
Yeah, I'll let Andrew start.
At the last meeting, when we did started off our land development code amendments, Mr. Laurie had brought up that he thinks that in the exception under the Class A, to make sure that this does not include approved accessory dwelling units, so we added that language for you.
Great, yeah, that was a quick fix, right? That was strictly a Commissioner Lynn.
Could you explain the criteria that differentiate a second single-family home from an accessory dwelling unit?
Accessory dwelling unit is approved as a use of an accessory dwelling unit, and we have all these conditions that you have to meet. Any of them that have a second single-family home on them are non-conforming, and they didn't go through that process. It was prior to the code.
But physically, there isn't a difference.
It's just how they were approved.
Procedural.
And I think it's size thing too, though, part of the criteria for the accessory dwelling unit is the 700, believe it's size on that. There's 760 or something.
760 units.
So it is functionally a little bit of a smaller space. Any comments on that? Are we all good with that addition, that change to clarification? Good, okay, awesome. Reducing side yard setbacks for duplex, triplex, and 4-unit dwellings. So it looks like just in the medium density residential, multi-family residential, there's a proposal to, again, with the ultimate goal to increase density throughout the city or in these districts in particular.
Right, make it a little easier to, a little more maybe profitable or make it work, profitability wise. And, we're just suggesting this for the NGR. And we had thought about also thinking about some other options with the green belts, but we'll get to that.
One thing I noticed is it's the same as the mixed use setbacks, right? So it's making it in that way more consistent with the mixed use, which kind of makes sense. Any thoughts, comments about that?
Well, the only thing, so we're providing a proposal just for the duplexes and multiple family residential ones too, but the idea is, are you wanting to look at reducing also the 3 or 4 dwelling unit setbacks in NDR and MFR? Like how far is the planning commission want to go
Oh,
on
I
this?
see, I see. What do people think about that? Commissioner Ward?
I would like some input from the fire department before we start pushing buildings closer together. That's one of the main reasons that side yard setbacks were created to begin with, was to stop the spread of fire and give them access to some of these side faces of the building. When you reduce it down to 5 feet, we've already increased the height of the buildings to 31.5 feet. Doesn't really leave room to put up ladders or, get people out of windows if they have to, when you do that. And then if you can't use a ladder, even for maintenance on the building, switch to scaffolding, but that's more expensive. And you're not gonna put up scaffolding just to wash the windows or something like that, where you might be inclined to maintain your property better with the ladder. I think 5 feet is getting to be, kind of narrow, especially when we're allowing encroachments into that with, if they have a fence, the fence is supposed to be on their property rather than directly on the line. or it takes up a portion of their property, that 5 feet, we're allowing balconies and porches and steps and stuff to encroach in that as well. So, I'm all for trying to fit more density into the city, but I don't want to do it at the expense of letting properties run down or compromising on the safety in case of fires.
Well, one of the things that we, one of the reasons we're confident that this would be fine is that, a few years ago, when we suggested changing the requirements for building separation, the fire department basically said they weren't concerned with, having a minimum building separation requirement. So I don't recall exactly where it is in the code, but
5 feet, we're at 5 feet.
yeah. So basically, the building codes department also said, you know, as long as it complies with building codes, the design. So now in the code, it doesn't say there has to be a minimum separation distance. It just says that the developer must get the plans approved through the building codes department before they present it to the planning commission. If they're going to submit a site plan, they need to know that it's going to pass the building codes requirements before they show us what it is, because we don't any longer want to say this is a minimum separation, and the fire department was good with that, but we can certainly talk to them about any specific changes.
Well, I don't feel comfortable recommending the 5 feet without hearing additionally from them, not the whether they feel that compromises their ability to find rescue or access to fight the fire.
Is that something that maybe staff could look into? We'll kind of pause that one and just get a little more information about we finalize that. It's a good point. Public health and safety, that's our primary goal here, so.
Yeah.
Thank you. And then when, as far as extending it to the 3 and 4 family dwelling units, they are more likely to, I think, have an exterior fire escape. When you add additional units that maybe don't have ground floor plan, they're gonna need a second means of escape, and an exterior fire escape is allowed within the side yard, as long as it's not enclosed, but that takes up space too, so I guess they prefer not to extend it to 3 and 4 family units at this time.
Anybody else have thoughts on this?
If the fire department says that they're cool with it, and would you be willing to revise that stance if we go through this?
To the 5 feet,
Yeah.
I guess so, yeah.
Alright.
I say, I think it affects more than just the fire department, it affects trying to do maintenance on the building too, but I think the primary concern is safety. And fires don't spread like they used to with building materials that are used, but as we get things closer and closer, we may find out that we do have a problem, and Marquette's spent a lot of effort trying to get rid of it before.
Yeah.
Well, I think one of the reasons we didn't suggest reducing that standard is that there's, and it's fine if you want to go there, but there's no green space requirement in the MDR aside from the 3 and 4 dwelling units, I think.
No, the green belt is only when you're next to another zoning district.
Right.
The other zoning district that will have your requirement.
And the maximum impervious surface,
Depends on lot size.
but does it also depend on dwelling units?
No, it just depends on the lot size.
So depending on the lot size, there is still a maximum impervious surface, so that is a plus if you want to reduce it. That will ensure that there's green space on the lot. The maximum impervious surface standard, which is in the environmental performance or environmental requirements section of the code, Article 8 requires that. There's a chart, there's a sliding scale. I think it's, the maximum though is 60%.
Article
Article 4.
4. Yep, so for residential, it's 60% of the maximum of the smaller lot.
So maybe it would be. So we'll talk to the fire department about that. So there's a section.
Great, we'll come back to that one then. Moving along. Let's see. Is it section on duplexes here? Is that the next thing we're looking at, the side yard setback for duplexes?
Well, that would only get changed if you guys decide to do,
Oh, that's really.
if you're making the change in the above chart.
Okay, right. Got it. Okay, so reducing green belt standards, that's the section, yeah. Looking at section 54.1003.
So would the planning commission want to reduce that multiple family residential green belt buffer distance? So for the multiple family, it's highlighted in blue here, they have to meet within the buffer area, 1 tree per 30 linear feet. And if they are adjacent to LDR and MDR, they have to be 30 feet away with no structures or parking lots, all of it. So it's all just green space. Mixed use, they're 35 feet away, central business district 35, GC and RC 35, and industrial and BLP 40 feet.
What's on this one? I'm trying to think of the logic about why mixed use is 15, but multifamily is 30. Like, why was that? Why did, I don't know what the logic was there.
Well, I think that one thing is nuisances, trying to dilute basically some of the nuisance issues between properties that have distinctly different characters. So, you know, a multifamily lot, you're gonna have a lot of people coming and going through the parking lots, and a lot more, potentially a lot more just kind of activity noise, whatever. And then there's also the green space issue with, you know, a lot of apartments in the classical sense, the old traditional type of boxy apartment buildings didn't necessarily provide a lot of green space. So this was one way to ensure there would be green space around those properties that people use for recreation. I know those, and you have, look like you want to say something. I don't know that that kind of apartment style is what we're going to see much of. I don't think we're necessarily going to see much of that anymore or in coming years. That's kind of that kind of boxy apartment building style is going out of fashion.
Yeah.
So
Question about the tree planting that we require. We don't allow them to plant the trees right up to the property line, right? They have to offset it based on the crown size.
Yeah, they just can't show that it's gonna encroach.
So we're telling them they gotta put these trees back there, they're gonna have a 20 or 30 foot crown spread. Can't really reduce it significantly.
yeah, it's good.
I don't know, I live next to another family residential, like the buffer, and it's one of those little boxy style, and the kids come on and use that space from the apartments, like, it might have like a function also, like just for the use of the people living in those apartments.
In the yard.
Yeah, like a little bit of a yard.
So we kind of want to have a discussion. We're not experts in assuming that our any recommendation we have would be based on any, we don't have any recommendation on this. It's just one of the things we saw as a potential area we might want to reduce these standards a bit.
Yeah, Commissioner Clemens,
I was just gonna ask, is the goal in this to actually increase the numbers to reduce costs per building, or what is our hope for this?
I think they encourage more construction of multifamily.
Okay, so,
It's just that's the same rationale we had for reducing the, separation requirements for buildings where you have multiple buildings on a lot. I mean, we had these pretty massive separation requirements previously, like 1.5 times the building height, between every building. That's a lot of space that's
So you had
going
like 70 feet sometimes that
unused
you
on
had.
some properties.
okay. So later in this document, we talk about reducing the size, the diameter of the trees that are planted. I think that's gonna reduce our costs, and survivability of an 1.5-inch tree is pretty significant, and that will reduce the costs per building in a way that we can have kind of our cake and eat it too. We'll have the trees, but reduce the costs, and if we keep this, but reduce that minimum size tree that we need to plant, that might achieve our goals while keeping green space available.
are you hearing from developers that they think that this would, something like this would be an incentive to do more development? I mean.
No, but we don't hear much from developers, period.
Right.
About what we should do. I mean, we've really taken an initiative for all of these changes we've been making without a whole lot of input from developers.
Yeah, I can see the pros and cons of this one, I don't know. Yeah, I think.
I like the idea of having a yard with the apartments. You've got families, already, you're squished.
Yeah, Commissioner Greenwood?
Yeah, I mean, you want a yard for the apartment. But then you want to stuff 4-unit buildings on a lot with a 5-foot offset. And no real yard. And no place to park. I mean, you look at all these developments and the cost is just like it says in here, you want evergreen trees. Evergreen trees are nice, except they grow very fast and they grow very large.
Wayne, do you think there's any of these, abutting zoning district, the standards here, the 35, 40 feet that, I think the 40 kind of makes sense where we're talking about industrial land adjacent, but I don't know what the other ones, you don't have any particular feeling about like these standards should be reduced 10 feet or something like that?
Well, again, I think you can reduce them all if you want, because like you said, who's gonna build and where are they gonna build? When we have all these standards, but they only apply every millennium or whatever, because it's just not happening.
And I guess another thing to consider is the lot size requirements for 5 units. 5 units is multifamily. Well, 3 units is technically multifamily, but in our code now we're allowing 3-unit multifamily in MDR, 4 units with special land use permit. And we have a 6-unit development. It's subject to these requirements, just like it would be if it was 60 units. They're all kind of the same. So I guess one reason these standards might be logically lower is that a developer could certainly say, I want to have a 40-foot setback between my building and the next property. They might not want to. They might want to say, okay, I only want it to be, I want it to get the smaller building. I need a smaller lot to put a 6-unit building on, and I don't want to have 30 feet on one side or 35 feet of space. And that might make sense if they're only developing a 6-unit building or 8-unit, garden apartment, garden bungalow kind of development or something like that. Or they've got a courtyard in between the buildings. So it's just that in that way, it'd be more permissive to allow the developer to decide how much space makes sense for their development. And usually developers aren't going to shoot themselves in the foot and design something that's not going to appeal to the people they're trying to sell the units to in the end.
For sure.
Well, I think one of the areas that we have seen conflict in the past, and for the most part, I think it's been resolved, has been where the 3rd Street Business District butts up against residential properties directly behind them. And we've got that down to 15 feet, if I'm reading this correctly. It's all the space they need there. We're still telling them we need to plant trees in there.
3rd Street's different. They don't fall under this.
Okay. Well,
That falls under the 3rd Street corridor, transit.
even for the setbacks,
They have their own requirements.
And then some of those,
does it exceed the 15 feet that we're seeing here?
Well, I don't believe they have a required buffer like this is here.
Is there a column or requiring either in Black Rocks or the,
When they were doing the outdoor stuff, we were asking for noise control.
but the apartment building that hasn't been built because of the shared driveway? And there was requirements that they have plantings and stuff behind that building.
Yeah, they're making landscaping requirements and all that, but it's not this.
Okay,
It's gonna be like per the lot and they'll have certain things.
well, still, I don't think we're requiring 30 feet behind those buildings. And it is a change in zoning. It's very comparable to this. And so if 15 feet or whatever we got over there seems to work for what's necessary, it would probably work with multifamily as well.
so this is something we can come back to again, kind of purpley then.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see what comparable city codes do. See what other people.
That's a good idea.
Okay, well, let's come back to that one. Wait, the home office section, is that what we're looking at next? Section 54.622. Just clarifying the definition of the maximum floor area for the home office. Right?
Yeah, we're having it match the home occupation language. Does you have any issues with that?
Seems pretty straightforward. Good, okay. Good, an easy one. Easy one to get out.
I try to sprinkle in between.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, clarify ag drawings matching accessory structure requirements.
So this is a big change in that we're adding illustrations.
Oh, yeah. Sure.
I think could be quite helpful. There's a lot of questions.
Yeah, so when we have developers, contractors, architects ask, we explain it to them visually if it's in the code, and then the eve measurement is defined a little bit more, then they'll understand. So we have this bigger example going from the dirt edge to the property line, that's 2.5 feet. then we show it as it's an overhead drawing from the eave, the 2.5 feet. So it's explaining how that works. Like even though you're allowed in a zoning district for an accessory structure to be 3 feet from the lot line, then your eave can't be more than, or less than 2 feet from the lot line. So you only get 6-inch eaves. So if they want bigger eaves, then you can move the building. And then we ran into an issue with the contractor that we had to go with a complaint, go out and do a measurement, and having to discuss with them where that, the drip is and how that works for the measurement of 2.5 feet. So we got clarified in the code, so we can all do it. Any thoughts on that one?
I'm looking to some of our resident construction experts. What do you think? Wayne, would you have any ideas, thoughts on that?
No,
Clear, does it make sense?
Pictures are always better.
I know.
Okay. Next one is access ways, so we added a figure to show how that works. If you say, for example, the proposed ramp and landing, how it can encroach into that front yard. And per what the code states up here, and then how the measurements, you can see that it can't be closer than 1 foot to the lot line, things like that. So again, just showing an illustration of how the text reads. Did you guys have any issues with that?
Okay.
Next one is showing an illustration for the next paragraph. An example of how you can encroach with the proposed unenclosed porch and steps, and how that language above reads. If you guys have any issues with that illustration.
That's helpful because I feel like that comes up.
And that's why we're doing it. If we get all the questions, we figured, no, let's, whatever we can do.
That's great.
Okay. Then the next one, patios and X-ray decks. This one has a little bit of calculation in it because it states you can't occupy more than 20% of the front yard. So then we kind of illustrate how that calculation works, right? That project. Do you guys have any questions or issues with that one? The next one is how the bay windows, basement window wells, and chimneys work. So I gave all 3 examples and the calculations and how that works. Again, just to kind of show them how we calculate that out. You guys have any issues or questions with that? You're not seeing, okay.
Straightforward, yeah.
The structural amenities, we found that it wasn't matching what we had for the language above. So language above with all of the encroachments, it was 3 feet from the side or the rear. But for some reason, they had we were still showing structural amenities having to be 5 feet from the rear lot line. So this is to match, have a language match up with the same type of things. Do you guys have any issues with that proposal?
That's good.
Ready? So here's another hopefully easy one. This is another where it used to be MDQ, now it's Eagle. So went through code and found all the places that we need to switch to that new language. Do you guys have any issues with that?
I just have a clerical question for this one.
Sure.
So would it be possible to add at the end of each one of these the acronym in parentheses?
Yeah, most people call it Eagle.
Yeah.
Yeah, Commissioner Greenwood?
yeah, just a question, do we take it off the front page of our phone book?
Mhm.
Do we change it on the front page?
Because it does reference it.
Well,
Cover page,
Yeah.
didn't have it before.
Yeah, I don't know about that. This was like a requirement. They gave us
No, I mean, it's-
$30,000 for this project, for the land development code project. And this was a required thing we had to put on the plan as part of that grant. So,
So the cover page
Yeah.
on the code book is still reading Michigan Environmental Quality, or not reading Eagle.
DEQ,
But I don't think that agency exists anymore.
no, it doesn't.
But it did at the time of the grant, they were the ones that were part of it, so I believe what you're saying, Dave,
Yeah, they required this to be
right? Be on
on
there for the
as
grant.
part of the grant.
Is there a timeline?
That's a good question.
I think that sometimes there's a timeline.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah. So,
Yeah, good catch. I've always wondered that too. Why is that on there?
They do come back and audit that stuff once in a while.
But if they don't
They
exist anymore.
reported some of the plaques missing from parks where they had provided grant funding for improvements. Had to replace them before, so. Even after it changed names, I think.
Okay, so I'll add the EAGLE acronym to it, and then we'll look into if we need to change the cover sheet.
Alright, we just update the agencies.
Alright, clarify the maps with the adding. Language.
I just, you know, if people were asking about the front, and it seemed like it was harder for them to find, so looking at it, it seemed to make more sense to put it in its own subsection, and then also adding additional language without causing we're adding that if the property owner has relative documented disabilities or indefinitely or rare cases the site cannot be. So besides the language above, we added the language of the relevant documented disabilities. So for instance, if they're in a wheelchair and they cannot park in one spot, but need to park in front of the house, that's where they need to park in order to make the house.
we heard this from a person in that situation, this 100% disabled veteran. Brought that issue up. Probably worth adding.
That makes me wonder where else in the code, stuff like that. We missed it. I think that's a great addition. Anybody have any thoughts?
Having tried to navigate this city as a new person missing parts, I wholeheartedly agree.
Yeah, well, and if there are other parts of the code where it would make sense to put similar language,
Absolutely.
bring that up to us, because that could be something that would be beneficial to them.
Well, just, even like the sidewalks that Aaron and I talked about. We clean the sidewalks and we clean the streets, but we always leave that pile in the middle. And it's just, I just don't go downtown. So I appreciate it.
Commissioner Primo, did you have a comment?
No, I'm just, when they're saying front yard parking, correct? So on a corner lot, I know the house I lived in for growing up in town. They don't park in front of the house. They park in basically the side yard, which, because it's a corner lot.
Is it front yard, you're saying? It's a corner lot or
It's on a corner lot, so technically you have two front yards.
Right.
So I guess you could call it the front yard.
We're gonna go over some changes in line to that situation.
And it also doesn't kind of give zoning administrator discretion on something.
If they can, for the winter parking waiver, this is the section that they can ask, if they can meet the conditions, right? And what we were, the changes is to put in its own subset and then add that relevant documented disabilities. So people do ask us for waivers, and if they meet this section, we're allowed to do this one during the winter parking.
Feeling self-created difficulties. I don't know where that came from, but,
Well, a self-created disability may be,
or difficulties, like
Well, that's,
adding renters. Yeah, no, we don't need to go into, I just,
Yeah,
like, I just thought that was interesting. Anyway, I get it, it totally makes sense, I think it's a good addition. Any other comments? Okay, moving on. Oh wait, no, there's another piece, right, and then maximum parking allowed.
it's just clarifying, that if you have parking that is,
interior.
yeah, we want to count that against the maximum parking, for any kind of surface parking lot or parking spaces that might be created.
Because the very first sentence, it says in order to minimize excessive areas of pavement which depreciate, blah, 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 that's why we had the maximum, because the interior, where it's not. There was an interpretation made, we're just adding the interpretation into the code.
Any comments on that one?
Okay, so, this is a long one because, first, we don't know why it was created this way, but the sign definition, sign types, and sign definition in general was two separate sections, and you never knew which section, you know, it was kind of crazy into the board. You know, kind of difficult, right? So we're adding them all into one sign definition section.
So it's really not much to review because it's everything that was in the code before in two sections.
Is now
Put
in
together in one section with everything else, order. Trying to make sense of the world.
Making sure.
Just when we get to the graphic on canopy signs, looks like the new graphic was overlaid on an old one and it didn't completely cover the old one.
Yeah.
So there's, on the fringes, there's, over on the right side and on the bottom, there's, so you showing through
Right.
right there.
Nice catch. What is it, area?
Oh. Okay, couldn't figure out what that was. Okay, any other comments or suggestions on the sign?
This one, do you want
Yeah, the next thing is, for exempt signs, we, on the page 27 here, we wanted to, suggest to increase the for special decorative displays. Or there's no commercial advertising to allow their use to be up to 120 days instead of 90.
Can you give an example of what you just like that?
I think the DDA might put up special signs for, or the city might put up special things during the summer. Special signs that the city's kind of concerned. Can you think of any other things? I can't really think of what triggered this specifically. That's like, I'm thinking, I don't recall exactly.
banners and
You want to increase the number of,
90 days to 120.
Are you okay with that? It's for non-commercial, right? So it's not like selling stuff, just informational stuff. Okay. Sounds good. Definition of marginal access street.
Yeah, this is a very technical engineering thing. So, but this is important because we just approved, a couple of years ago, planning commission approved one of these for the Hemlock Park development. And this is what our city engineer kind of recommended, was creating this or altering this definition so that we have another category, or that the category itself is extended or expanded upon in this way. So instead of just saying it's parallel to a minor street, marginal access street, something parallel to, saying it's adjacent to an arterial collector, an arterial collector adding that, or major thoroughfare. So it didn't have these specific terms in there that engineers and planners use when we're talking about specific types of streets, because a major thoroughfare, really, that's just a general term. It's not specific. And we wanted some specificity here. Providing access to private or public properties was another thing. And he said, this is sort of persnickety engineering speak, but it's kind of important when we're looking at certain project approval processes, like that Hemlock development, which we consider a marginal access street, since it's only the marginal part of it is, it's not going through to, it's not on the grid system, it's not connecting through from, like, this particular street starts on the access, or the entrance to it is from M553, and it only intersects with one other street in there that's also a marginal access street. So it's adjacent to that arterial or major, it's really a major arterial, it's a highway. And it provides access to private in this case, private properties. And so, blah, blah, blah. It's just really very technical.
If it's gonna make Nick happy, I think it's an easy fix.
Yeah.
Everybody good with that? Okay, is this our last one here, the updating mural definition for?
Well, now it gets interesting. Finally, it's gonna get.
This is fascinating,
How did this come about?
Well, so we've had, for quite a while, we've had a lot of, I guess, conflicting opinions about what should be allowed in murals, right? And there's lots of these great murals that have been painted on buildings in the past several years in the city. We've had a couple issues. We had issues with a couple of them. The picture on the bottom here is the Black Rocks side of the Black Rocks building facing that empty lot Stephen mentioned before, where they had initially put images on there that showed their logo on, and really it was a very specific can of beer that they sell, you know, designed for one of the brews that they make. And you can put a commercial image in a mural as long as it is approved as a sign. So there's very specific, you know, go back to the section we just went through on sign definitions. There's a whole section in here on how, what constitutes the sign area of any particular wall sign. So a mural can have totally allowed to have some commercial imagery in it. But the problem for a lot of commercial properties is you don't have an unlimited amount of sign area because you own a building. You have a limited amount of sign area because nobody wants to see a sign everywhere on a building. So there are limitations on how much of that wall can be used as a sign. And in this case, Black Rocks, I don't think they have room to put more signs on the building. So they had to paint over part of that area that showed their logo, can of beer. And so we worked with some other businesses on different options for something that looks like maybe what they sell, but it's not specific. One, Lakeshore Depot is one, they have some cool mural imagery there about like farm scenes, but it's not. And this is tough because we don't want to say, you can't show a picture of somebody like eating fruit, it's ridiculous. But so we're kind of looking for some feedback from you because there are these areas where it's very gray, and the Jim's Music one is one that was brought up to us by a business owner saying, well, okay, if this beer can is commercial advertising, then what about the people, what about the instruments and musicians shown on the side of Jim's Music? Or what about the ice cream sign on the side of the Frosty Treats building? Well, that's actually a sign. If you go look at it closer, it looks like it's painted on there, but it's actually a tin sign. So that it's permanent as a sign. But we're kind of looking for a little more feedback from you guys, and hoping maybe you'll come to some kind of consensus on, is there some kind of way we can say, yeah, you can put things that are related to your commercial interest, and it can be a certain percent of the wall, or, what's another way we can say that that is okay up to a certain point without specifically allowing them to paint like a big logo of one of the more, famous brands that they sell on the side of the building, just because it's part of the mural. It's a tough one. Another one.
Last point again.
Well, yeah, so if the owner doesn't want to, or doesn't have room to put a sign, say this is going to be a sign area, but they want to put something that's related to the products they sell, how much of that area might be okay to be related to the products they sell? And then, can that be specific to a brand that they sell, or is it, or should it be, I'm thinking, we'll come down more on can be something related, and it can be a certain amount or a certain percentage of the wall area of the building that they want their mural on. Like the Jim's Music one's a good example. They don't show any specific brands on anything. I mean, it's just people performing, people dancing.
Can I add to it? I think that, now understanding it more, talking about it and understanding it more, I think that if we look at murals in town, if for instance, we look at the mural that's coming into Front Street, that, the hands, right? That's a specific mural. Then we have a mural that's on the building, that Be Well building across from Contrast. That's a mural. Then you have that garage with the mural kind of mural with a bird. I think those are considered true to their being murals, right? They have nothing to do with anything in that building. These grade that area a little bit, right? Because they're a mural because they expand a certain space over a building. But when we start talking about it in more particulars, they are, in a way, a subliminal sign, right? They are. And so that's maybe where you have people saying, oh, well, this, you know, like I had my little Peter logo, why isn't this considered? So I think that's where the difference may lie. Because if we look at the definition of the artistic mural, and you look at those first examples that I gave you, they have nothing to do with the building and what the building itself is providing.
Do you know, like, you probably know this better than any of us because you work in this space, like, do you know, do they, for example, the Evolve Marquette, is that paid for by people who own that building? Like, who?
I think some of those are grants.
Those were grants.
I think so, yeah. And I think that, so that could be something that we could look into a little bit further to kind of understand. Is it something that is being funded by the individual owners, or is there a grant? I know that natural one, and I think the Evolve came through grants and other funding, where this and Black Rocks was probably paid for by the owners and the sure people. So, you know, it's like apples and oranges in a way. It is something to kind of look at, and I hate to like be the rock in the shoe, but I am trying to like say that there is a bigger, you know, it isn't as black and white as we're thinking.
Well, it's
at this
not,
point in time.
yeah, it's been an issue for us in enforcing the code for a long time. Most of the property owners have been pretty understanding. But when I look at this example came up about gyms, and I really have a problem with saying that there's commercial content in there. I understand that they're all about selling instruments and promoting musicians through the sale of instruments. But I don't really see that as direct commercial content. Nothing says Gibson guitars or anything else, brand name. I recognize the Beatles and Jim Morrison and Jerry Garcia and Bob Marley and maybe Satchmo but that doesn't, to me, say that's not a sign per se, but that's my opinion. And you might have a different opinion. That's why I want to bring this up, because if one business owner is saying this, this is a problem for me, maybe we should be talking about it. One other example I'll give, and then I'll be quiet. You guys talk about it. One business that wanted to do something that we had to say no, that I still have, some issues with, is Quick Stop Bike Shop. They wanted to do a mural of bikes on the side of the building. Bikes are clearly what they sell. So we kind of had to say, that's the code says you can't show products that you sell.
Well, isn't Bigfoot and the mermaid holding a pint of beer?
No,
Oh,
they cut it out.
No, it's
no, it's still there. It's still there.
Yeah, so now there's an issue the owner argued. Is it beer?
Oh, see, yeah, that's what I'm
It's
saying.
a pint glass with something.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. There's an issue with the problem of who funds that, what it is selling, like that, like, I mean, I would love, but that's a problem.
All right, is that Commissioner Travis hand, and then Commissioner Wright, and then Commissioner Wright?
Oh, I was just gonna say, I tend to agree with Commissioner Hunter, the vagueness of things. I just don't know, like, in the code, how we define those differences. And I'm not entirely certain that saying that if you're grant funded, one thing, it's because someone could, through the generosity of their own heart,
Yeah.
grant themselves and have a completely non-commercial mural.
Well, there's
But-
a definition, right? If the mural depicts on-premise commercial content or off-premise commercial content, the portion of the mural containing commercial content will be considered a sign for purposes of the ordinance, will be regulated as such.
Okay. I tend to think that, this is my personal opinion, the more murals we have in town, kind of the better. And I'm willing to fudge the sign requirements a little bit in order to have more artwork on display. But I don't know if that should be as a percentage of the wall or a maximum allowable commercial content portion of the mural, but I want to see more public artwork.
Can I do a little research on that a little bit? I mean, do we have to come up with a,
No, but I think that coming up with some consensus, I think most of us would agree with that position, Ken, and that's,
Yeah.
you know, like, what I wanted to get around to is like, with the idea of painting, like a scene where people are mountain biking. So they sell bikes, so maybe there's no brand names on the bikes, right?
Right.
So you don't show brand names. And maybe the bikes themselves, you know, have to be a certain percent or less of the mural. You know, or you, I mean, or
You don't sell any of
those.
But
Or
I think
basically you
that-
have to change the definition to say
Yeah.
it's not commercial content because those things are what they sell.
I mean, I would like to see quick stuff, but on the side of their building, that's why I'm just saying that it doesn't, that right now there's a disconnect. It's the apples and oranges.
Right, I know you've been doing that for a while.
Just as far as the funding, I believe the store on the corner, right, 550 for Sugar Loaf, you want to pay for that, and I don't believe there's any commercial content in it. And so it isn't all grant funded. And again, I think that is an enhancement of beautification of this town when we do have more and more buildings. I don't care, I mean, even a garage that does car maintenance, if they had a car on a lift on the side of the building
Yeah.
with no lettering, I wouldn't have a problem with that. I don't think it's so much the relation to the product or service being in the building as it is the lettering. And if we can just say, well, any lettering on there constitutes a sign, and if it's related to the business, and we'll measure that, and we have to have a permit, a sign permit, or you have to.
So images of commercial content would be allowed.
Yeah.
I
So
don't
would
have a
that
problem.
apply to them with the Lakeshore Depot one, because they have their name on the square?
Yes.
Yeah, just that's red square would be part of their allowable signage.
Yeah.
But the rest of it, you know, whether it's a whole selection of vegetables and fruits that they're selling inside or not, it doesn't really detract from the area.
Yeah, and I think in abstract, fruit or vegetable is very different than a logo.
Commissioner Lucas, and then Senator
Yeah, most of what I was thinking is already been hit on. Were all three of these, like, were they approved, or was it a grounds for approval? Like the Jim's music, is that required?
That was done. The only one that we were involved in prior to being placed was the Lakeshore Depot.
Okay.
The gyms was done without permit as far as I know.
Yes, they did that.
I mean, they didn't ask us to call. That would have been a hard one to necessarily, that could have been difficult, but they don't really, again, that's my opinion is, within our office, sometimes there's different opinions, and that's why we need clarification.
So lettering and logos can constitute a sign, but images of commercial content.
Images of products.
Non-specific commercial content,
Yeah,
like a
that's-
bike would not be like a surly bike or something, right?
Right, without any logos, brand names.
So for example, as far as like like Black Arts had a can, did they paint a can without lettering, but you could still tell it was like a Grand Rapids can or something? But, I'm just trying to get.
You mean if they had a logo on it?
No, but if they didn't have the signage of it, right, so it's an abstraction of it.
Yeah.
If it's an
Yeah.
abstraction
So
of
we
it,
could tell that it was that, but it wouldn't technically.
it's installed.
And actually, the building next to Black Rock, so the one that's not there yet, that Steve mentioned before, we went through some design review with them, initially on the building that they want to build and the artwork that if they build what they presented to us, it's going to be really beautiful. They wanted to have their corporate logo worked into a mural on the building, but we said, okay, it can't be your logo per se. That's strictly commercial content. That's, no question. So they designed something that was an abstraction of their logo. And it worked out pretty good, to my opinion. I thought it looked pretty cool. So that kind of thing, I think we're in agreement that kind of thing will be okay.
Thank you. I'm curious about what might take place if, say, the building is sold and it has some kind of logo or something painted into this acceptable mural, what the feeling would be if they would have to change it to be able to then adapt it to what the new business is in that building.
You mean if they submitted a sign permit for a logo?
Now, if someone who's sold their building that had this mural that had the acceptable commercial product painted on the side of it, how would the feel of the city or people around it that have seen it would feel if it was having a.
Well, if it was non-specific commercial content, it would still be a mural that's not tied to any signage.
Oh, it sounded like you were accepting that if it was tied to something commercially that was sold there, then it would be acceptable.
That image is a non-specific commercial content, that's what I heard. But if it's lettering, logo, or brand names, that's constitutes a sign. Unless I misunderstood.
I thought we were changing it, so I just want to clarify.
You're right.
I don't have any problems with Jim's because he's got a bunch of famous people and it's only black and white. I mean, black and gray. It's not specific to anything other than he's kind of honoring people that are famous in music. So, yeah,
I think on the other side, there's some more like, definitely like somebody, there's a bigger image of somebody with a full body, full body guitar.
I don't
Yeah.
I don't know about that.
But again, it's not a specific reference to a brand or anything like that.
Yeah, I like it seems like the interpretation it can be a big gray area. I like the I'm just stating that I like the suggestions of like an abstraction of a brand. You can still, as long as it's not exact, I like that. And then the language part, I think those are two like tangibles that you kind of got it. As far as it's a gray area between signage and art. I think those are two things that are easily interpretable. So I think some around that would be good.
Kind of go to, if, for example, Lakeshore Depot, they had to get a sign permit for the parking for Lakeshore Depot. But if they sold it and there's a different name, that sign permit's still active. So as long as that person is not changing, they're just changing the face of the sign, they don't have to get a new sign permit. If that kind of.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of
Sorry,
sorry, a little bit. I wasn't sure what exactly we were proposing to change.
Sure, right.
I do have another question, is that, an advertisement, is that considered more towards signage than mural? I would think that if you're advertising bikes, doesn't have to be specific, that would go more towards signage than mural.
Yeah.
If you're advertising beer, that's more of a sign.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, definitely.
I'm pretty sure.
I just think all art is meant, excuse me, it's meant to be interpreted by the individual, and somebody will come along and say that, okay, there's black rocks in the picture. They're advertising their business. Everybody's gonna come up with their own interpretation of it, and, I don't think we're gonna be able to write language that will say we won't get any complaints about it.
No,
But it will help us out a little bit
Yeah.
more.
yeah, well, we'd like to be able to say, those bikes you want to paint on the side of the building are gonna be fine. But you have to, and be specific, no logos, no lettering, no brand names. Otherwise, you're fine.
We don't want to be too picky. I mean, I understand where you're coming from, but they're trying to make their buildings look nicer. To some extent, we want to encourage that.
Very much, yeah.
Is there a way to say like the purpose should be for it to be art, not for it to be like specific advertising? I don't know if that would be something to look at.
Well, so in mural, an original painting or texturing, you want that to say an original painting or texturing meant to be artistic. Now that's a
I think using that language, component inside will help. Because don't you think mural is suggestive of art anyway?
Right, yeah.
Okay, so we'll, take what you guys said tonight, write up something and present it to you, yeah, maybe the next meeting. Get done with it.
Yeah, we should have to, if you do want to do your research too, and like,
I think this is good.
Okay, moving on, adding language to existing frontages.
So this is in Third Street corridor section, and if you're not aware, that is a form-based code district. And every building in there, if it meets the criteria for having to comply with the land development code requirements when it's being developed or redeveloped, it has to meet one of 6 existing frontage types. So there's typologies for these frontages. A lot of the buildings that are there now don't meet any of those specific frontage types. And so we really thought we need to come up with this exception because you just can't stretch some of these to meet the frontage types that are presented in the LDC. In this form-based code district.
So here's the frontage types, yeah, porch, stoop,
Terraces.
terraces, forecourt, shop front. So if they, currently with code, if they don't meet it now, then they'd have to do a lot of construction trying to meet those things instead of keeping the same size of the frontage that they have. So this language just allow them to keep it.
Okay with that? We're good? Okay, downspout language.
So under stormwater management, let's see, so we have just a couple changes here. The first section, just adding that all applications and specific site plans, not just any old plans, must include provisions for proper management of storm. So just a little clarification. On the next one, this is an issue that we have had a lot of controversy over, gutters and downspouts, on buildings, and keeping, water that's originated on a property, on that property. Water being sent from one property to another is the cause of a lot of lawsuits, a lot of neighbor disputes. And And it's even, the Supreme Court has even ruled on that issue. That basically, the Supreme Court ruled that properties that are situated higher in elevation above other properties do not have to necessarily try to contain all the water to that property. They're basically allowed to have water leave their property because they are situated topographically higher. So, but we've had enough neighbor issues with this, and we've got an ongoing one now, civil issue that's probably gonna go to court. And it was one of the reasons we wanted to have those definitions, those drawings in there about the eaves, to help better clarify this issue. One of the things I talked to our hydrology engineer about is specifically downspouts and gutters, saying that they may be required to prevent stormwater runoff from roofs to adjacent properties and shall be installed in cases where the finished grade will slope down from the closest wall of the new building to the adjacent property with flow from the downspout directed into the property hosting the building, to prevent runoff to the adjacent property. And we kind of came in our department to a consensus that this makes sense. At least makes sense to try to put this in the code and see if we can enforce it.
I have a question regarding the first one about all applications and site plans. Are we requiring this of single family residential lots to? The stormwater utility, when the city set it up, basically determined a flat rate for most single family residential lots based on the fact that they were going to contribute a certain percentage of runoff, certain area of runoff to the street in front of them, somehow into the stormwater system. That's the way it's assessed and the way it's based on that. So they shouldn't have to require themselves to retain all the water on that lot. If they do, they'll have grounds to fight the stormwater utility.
That's a really good point. I think we need to revisit that one.
I agree.
Did you say, was it just single family or?
Well, in particular, single family lots, I guess I don't know if it would make any sense to go higher than that, but I think only the single family residential lots fall under that flat rate part of the stormwater fee structure. And if you look, at lots in the city with all the hills, your Sheriff's Hills or some other portion of the city, most of those lots don't really even have a choice. It all slopes right to the street, and they may increase or decrease the time of concentration when they put a roof in the driveway in there. It comes through down the driveway instead of through a grassy slope, but it's still contributing.
Mm-hmm.
There is a size limit on the lots within the rate structure that fall into that flat rate category. I can't recall what it was.
So come back to this one, is that what we're thinking?
Yeah, at least on A.
What do you guys think about B?
Just the wording in the beginning of this, like rain gutters and downspouts may be required, is like may versus will be required, like is it like subjective case by case, or would it be always?
Yeah, I think the reason I suggested putting may in here is because it could be an after the fact requirement. If we have disputes between, if it turns out that the property that you're having runoff from one building to another, we can come back and say, or we can condition approval on the fact that if runoff turns out to be a problem, that we will require gutter system installed. To my mind, that's better than some of the situations we have where neighbors end up in court with each other. But there's no guarantee it's not gonna be, that's not gonna be fought. But in the second part of this, shall be installed in cases where the finished grade will slope down from the closest wall of the new building to the adjacent property. That's one where we can clearly say, in this instance, you have to take care of the stormwater through a gutter system.
Any other thoughts on that? You good with that language?
So it's like, the city will be part of any future lawsuits. And
I was just gonna say, this
Instead of
could be
civil
litigation,
disputes
I can tell you that right now.
Well, that's why we've always not, up to this point, haven't tried to put anything in the code regarding this. But there are so many complaints that happen between properties about this. And it seems like a logical thing when people ask you, why isn't there a requirement that if you're gonna build 3 feet from my property line and this building is on a slope, that building has gutters on it? Or otherwise the roof pitches the other way or something so that this isn't gonna run off on my property and create a lawsuit or create a civil dispute between the neighbors.
Well, it's good to get on top of it, like if we're trying to encourage density, then have something like this.
There are other communities that have downspout requirements, gutter requirements, so I figured we can do.
We don't have a lot of gutter and downspouts because of the snow loads that we've had,
Right.
so
Right,
that also impacts your problem.
but in the case of accessory structures, which this applies to mainly, you don't really have the problem of ice buildup like you do on a heated building.
Because it's not heated.
All right, well, I don't hear anybody against this, so maybe we're good with this. Okay, changing the caliper to 1.5 inch.
That's the last thing.
The last thing we kind of talked about.
So- It's not? Oh, Lord, shoot, I don't know the whole.
We're close, we're getting there.
But so this is an issue that Wayne has brought up before. The landscaping requirements are too strict and are too odious. And we had the opportunity to talk to a landscape architect working on the Kings Rock Townhomes project. Probably all familiar with the situation down there where the developer failed on the project before it was completed, left the homeowners with a whole bunch of uncompleted work down there. And so the landscaping was obviously like not even close to being completed, and it was a mess. There had been irrigation system put in and torn out. And they did come up with a new plan for that, for the landscaping, which I think we approved. We
No, they haven't started it yet.
They haven't submitted it, but they've been working on that. And the same landscape architect is working on the plan for the 906 Bike Park on North Lakeshore Boulevard adjacent to Shires Park, which has been approved. But in talking to him about these standards, he had some pretty insightful comments about how hard it is to get some of the trees of this caliper requirement. And, you know, I had talked to the developer on the Best Western project on M553, and they said something very similar when they were trying to finish their landscaping last fall, is that we can't find nursery stock for these sizes. And we kind of made a decision there that, you know, it's better that they get the stuff planted, and if they can ensure survivability, or it would be better to get smaller caliper trees planted than to not do anything at all. And so we've come around to seeing that maybe those initial requirements were too obvious. So we're suggesting these requirements based on this local experts' advice and our own kind of come to Jesus kind of thoughts on this issue.
Yeah, I mean, I think this planning requirements should probably not even be in the code, get that up to the individuals. I mean, I don't know how many people here would take a wild guess at what it costs in front of the old Shopko building there. Then go by the hospital, look at all that beautiful landscaping. I would guess that we talk about cost, trying to get costs down for apartments and stuff. When you have to add $20,000 to $50,000 to plant a few trees like this with some shrubs, you're adding costs that really doesn't need to be added. And I've heard, you know, we need trees in Marquette. Well, go up on Marquette Mountain and look down at Marquette. And we've got tons of trees. And most of these, like, these plantings are one thing. But you go down and look at that L&M store there. You got curb, you got asphalt you have to remove. And you bring in the topsoil and you repair the asphalt. You add that up, and I'll bet that costs around $100,000 at least, which you are going to pay for. Now, if I have to do that to an apartment building, motel, whatever, I don't care what it is. I think, like most business people, are going to want their place to look nice, and they're going to try to make it look nice. But to require them to do this is almost nuts in my book. I mean, yeah, you can sit here and say, yeah, let's do this because it's going to look really nice. But it doesn't cost you a dime. But get out in the world and try to build something, see what it costs you.
I will say that L&M Fleet Supply fought the landscape requirements to the nail. They threatened to not do the project maybe at one point. I don't know if they went to that extent, but they were looking for workarounds to it, but then they ended up winning some awards from the beautification committee for the landscape. So I think they're happy in the end, and I don't know anything anymore for screws, you know, what they had with the landscape.
All I'm saying is take a ride by, and what did we really gain?
Looks really nice. Compared to what
Okay.
it used to.
You think it looks nice, that's fine. We can't have flags flying on the side that will distract us.
I don't know if we have any information on, but I'm more, I mean, I'm fine with the smaller tree size or whatever, but I like survivorship, like, because I know it is difficult to get trees to survive, you know, do we have any data on like, I mean, so we can require them to plant it, but then like, if they're not gonna water it, and, you know, take care of it, then it does become a bit of a moot point, and I don't think we have any language in there about like required maintenance, or
We do, if
About the trees,
they,
you know,
people have to replace the trees if they're not taken care of.
Oh, okay, like indefinitely or 5 years?
No, it's in there that it's up in the section in the landscaping, because we've already had to deal with that.
Yeah, I think that would be a big issue, so I guess I'm okay with a smaller standard. Yeah, for sure.
Well, I think the Gaines Rock project already has put the smaller trees in down there. Not only because I have my doubt that they'll survive the snow plowing. Normally, I think the city's spec calls for 2.25 inch diameter trees for street tree planting. And while the smaller ones, might be fine for, say, dollars further back on the property or, whatever, I think they can be a waste of time, or a waste of money to put them in along the street where you can just kind of gauge how many mailbox posts that are 4x4 get broken off when we get a heavy wet snow. Think what that tree is taking. Gets hit with that. But I do agree pretty much with Wayne too. I really think it's a nice thing to help beautify the city, but I think it's the city overstepping their bounds with the project costs by requiring as much landscaping as we do. Especially, if we're saying we're requiring them to maintain it. And I brought up in previous meetings here a couple months ago how the city's been installing all this new landscaping with their recent projects, and they're not maintaining what they put in either. They're spending tens of thousands on irrigation systems and on the initial plantings and stuff, and then they're not committing any labor force to weeding and trimming and replacing. And you go down to the piers, down the Lower Harbor and a few of the other more recent projects, and look, they're all just weed choked beds. They're in water, but they're not fully wet. So, and they are specifying native plants, but there's a lot of weeds that come with native plants too that you don't want in there. And I think if the city wants to require it of private property owners, they need to set an example first. And they shouldn't be requiring all this. Because they're charging these same property owners for what they're putting in on public property and they're not maintaining it.
Other thoughts about these plant standards?
Do we have any idea what the cost was for Costco, where, at that site for, landscaping?
I don't know. But if you don't want to recommend reductions in the requirements, do that. Talk it out.
In Article 10.
I'm not just saying, I can go through there and just hatchet all the requirements.
Yeah, I'm not in favor of getting rid of vegetation requirements. Maybe there's a way to look at that section comprehensively and reevaluate the. That's what, yeah.
That's what I was gonna ask, is it a percentage for what the building costs are? Like a percentage that goes towards landscaping, or is it just this general rule?
General calculation.
So I'm wondering if there's like, we could come up with like a percentage of what the cost is that they're putting into the building and.
We don't want to get into costs.
No.
We don't want to get into costs. The way landscaping is required is by frontage, along the frontages of the building, in interior parking lot areas, and street trees. Street tree requirements were new to this code when we adopted it in 2019. Prior to that, there were no requirements for developers to place street trees along any of the frontages.
Only in the downtown waterfront.
Okay. But yeah, she's got, so there's quite a bit of calculation based on the amount of frontage, street frontage there is. And for the interior parking lot areas.
The smaller trees, you know, the larger trees are really expensive. And I understand what you're trying to get at, and I understand your thing about the snow, but doggone it, they're super expensive. And they are hard to get, the bigger diameter.
So I'll just go back to one of the reasons we were awarded money for the LDC under the Coastal Zone Management Office's Great Lakes Program was to try to reduce stormwater runoff to Lake Superior. And one of the main ways we can do that is reducing parking areas and increasing landscaping. So those are functional requirements, not just beautification requirements. The landscaping does reduce stormwater runoff.
And urban heat island effects, like if we are increasing density and we're increasing development, then
And
trees do provide a lot of other benefits.
Maybe we could get a deal with Michigan State. They're the only place I know that moves humongous trees all the time.
we've been talking about creating canopy requirements for the city to maintain a certain amount of canopy, and that's something that's proving trickier than, you know, it's not yet something we're ready to put into a draft code. I think it requires the city to go to comprehensively look at its existing tree ordinance and, you know, for multiple departments to try to agree on internally on how we could accomplish that. But in lieu of that, this, you know, requiring trees on private development is one of the only ways we can make sure that we're gonna keep a tree canopy that's healthy and, you know, robust in the city. Because otherwise, every place had trees, everywhere east of the Mississippi River was covered with trees at one time. Pretty much continuously from the sea coast to the Mississippi River. And so trees do disappear over time through development. And, you know, we're not always gonna have all the trees we have unless we do keep some requirements to keep that vegetation and trees
Would it
on
make
private
sense,
property.
would it make sense for us to circle back once the canopy regulations get further along, further developed, to come back and revisit this? Because, I mean, to me, they should be discussed together, right? And we're talking about trying to increase,
Yeah,
that's the primary goal. I mean, vegetation, sure, it's pretty, it looks nice, but I think ecologically, there's a function there that we should talk about.
but in the meantime, I think also that if Steve and Wayne, they want to make suggestions about the frontage landscaping or the parking lot landscaping to do some reduction on it in the meantime. I mean, it's a reasonable thing if you think it's overwrought right now. I mean, I don't know that we've had anybody say that we're, you know, development wise, that we're not gonna do a development because the landscaping is gonna cost too much, but you know, honestly, we did hear a lot of complaining from the L&M people about that site, but that site was
But let
one
me
where,
clarify that, they were reading the code wrong.
well, okay, there's that.
And then once we straighten it out, no, you don't have to do all of what you're thinking you have to do, that's different. Then they didn't.
Yeah.
They were providing more landscaping than they had to. And when we explained, actually, you're way overdoing it, then they reduced it to what they had to do.
Yeah, so I fully support the green space to control stormwater, but it doesn't all have to be with 2-inch or 4-inch or whatever trees. And you know, the trees do help draw more water than just grass or do flower beds, and they do provide some protection from the heat. But I think it'd be better off, I think I suggested this before, is awarding businesses, an award like the beautification committee gave to L&M. The city used to do that themselves, actually, give out beautification awards every year to properties that were well maintained or that were rehabilitated or such, to encourage that type of behavior and investment. And it wasn't a very expensive project, but they continued that for a number of years. Eventually it dropped like most projects. Beautification committee has taken up some of that, and maybe the two groups could work together and try to work on an incentive to get businesses. There's already an incentive for a business to have an attractive property just to bring customers in. If they get rewarded for that on top of whatever business it does, I think it shames the ones that don't follow through, and I think that's a better approach than mandating so many trees at such and such caliber. And
Yeah, I mean, Dave's an old forester, so how long do you think it takes an 1.5 inch tree to grow to 4 inches? These trees, are they gonna do it overnight, or is it gonna take several years before they develop a canopy that's worth having?
We're a planning commission, so the 1.5 inch caliber tree today is gonna be the 4 inch tree, you know, in
When?
15 years.
That's my question. How
Depends on
long?
the species, but.
If you look at the growth rings on a tree, no, unless we do like they do out west and you get the super trees in there that grow 10 times faster, so the growth rings are 1/2 inch each year instead of a.
Well, I don't know that, the speed of the growth is the most important thing, you know, it's really, we want the trees to survive more than anything and be healthy.
And then,
So we brought that up, and that's something, you know, we're gonna struggle with from time to time with certain properties, but if we're being told the, you know, a larger stock is hard to come by and it's super expensive compared to, I think what we heard was the 1.5 caliber tree is much less expensive than something like 3 inch caliber. And if they're willing to take care of those, if they're making the investment that we're requiring with the number of shrubs and trees, they should take care of it.
I was just gonna say that I think that, reducing this to 1.5 inches is a good incremental step towards reducing our costs. We don't necessarily need to look to eliminate all green space requirements, but this is a good way to reduce our costs moving forward.
Is there consensus around that, at least for now, and then maybe have a bigger conversation around canopy and vegetation and trees? Because we had talked about that woodland protections clause and that, you know, went away, so, but maybe we have a bigger conversation about that in a later moment. But until then, we're good with reducing it to 1.5. It's a little bit of a cost savings. Okay, great. Third Street Corridor District, form-based code here. Oh,
That's
just
the same thing.
Perfect.
So the next one is adding bike trail and phase requirement for grading tree clearing and to be shown for the site plan set.
Yeah, and the first item there is under proposed construction for the site plan requirements, showing that we want to make it specific that grading and tree clearing is only limited to areas that were approved through the phases of the project. If you're only approved for the first phase, you're not approved to go out and grade the whole site that you're proposing someday may be developed. And we saw that done, not that long ago with the Rolling Meadows project, and it was pretty galling to see how much was cleared without them really having the resources to go past, the first phase. They wouldn't have the resources to get the first phase done, so it ended up happening. So that, just putting that in there is one thing, and then down, farther down under circulation and access. Because this has come up so many times, especially through planning commission, we wanted to add trails to the, since there are so many trails in some of the areas where we're seeing development, to add trails to the requirements to show on the site plan. And that doesn't, we're not specifically looking for them to be uber particular about where they're showing the trail. I mean, we're not going to go and say, well, you know, our surveyor says it's 10 feet over here, and you're off by 10 feet. Just show us where there's a trail there. If there's a well-known trail, we want to see it on the site plan. So that's those two items.
Those look pretty straightforward to me. Anybody have any comments, questions? Okay, looks good. Moving on.
This is something that we did and also speaking with the city attorney is fixing section 54-1505. We add person, a person's not eligible to apply, and we didn't believe that was legally correct. So we're asking to change it for, city staff cannot approve an application. You can apply for it, but we can't approve it unless you meet these things. And then adding language that the person has other outstanding indebtedness to the city, or person has any unresolved violations of city code or state or federal. So we were just kind of cleaning this up.
Overview by our attorney.
Okay. Yeah, the attorney staff, they were happy. Okay. All right. The proposal.
So the 906
Access adventure.
Adventure property originally came with this design. They wanted to do a shared parking thing with the neighbor, but our code wouldn't allow it. So we were looking at that, and then also I'm talking with our city attorney that if we added language for the exception here, it would allow a scenario for two adjacent properties if they met the shared parking section of our code, that they wouldn't have to meet the 2-foot border between their property lines, that they could have something like this where the parking lot or the driveway or things like that are in there, as long as they create a parking easement agreement and record that with the county register of deeds. And then we would be reviewing that under a permit or site plan when they submit for the new project. Do you guys have any issues with that?
Well, time.
I was surprised we didn't have an easement agreement already. So,
Makes a lot of sense, yeah, Commissioner
I
Wood?
think we should be doing a lot more to encourage shared parking. And I don't think it's, you know, first one, as far as I know, Casa Columbia has had a street parking lot for years. Always friendly, but there's, I think there's a few others down too, but not enough.
Yeah, that one might have been a reason why we put in a requirement to have borders between.
So I think
Because they already work so much with each other.
the Third Street strip mall shares parking lot with like church and the business office and things too, so.
Yeah. So then the other two, do you guys just want us to add to the next meeting?
yes.
Sounds good to me.
All right.
No argument here.
What's that?
No argument here.
Yeah, we're good here. All right, so then we are at commission and staff comments. Commissioner Primo, we'll go down the line certainly.
No comments.
No comment?
Yeah, I'm just gonna welcome you. Welcome to the Weeds. Commissioner Ficken, really excited to have some young perspectives on the commission. Really grateful that you're bringing stuff up, so thank you.
Welcome to Commissioner Pitkin. Other than that, no comment.
Same, local.
Welcome. So, yeah.
Staff, any comments?
I think I'm gonna be sending you an email with the rest of the content from those, the Learning Circles project from the Climate Adaptation Task Force. Just because there were some we didn't cover, and I'd like you to have that content. I mean, you know where the website is, but it's been in the previous, planning commission agendas and packets. But, we're trying to decide what the next step of that project is gonna be, and it's still early phase of it, but, since some of you were pretty, interested in that, in the meetings, I just wanna make sure that we continue to, have access or, we don't kind of let that fall too far out of our consciousness, until we get into the next phase of it, which might be a few months. We will meet again, on 2 weeks from now
21st.
and go over some more LDC amendment, stuff, but there will not be any business.
Correct.
And I don't think there'll be any business for the first meeting of
Don't
February.
believe in anything, Smith.
So, yeah, kind of an easy street for work on the LDC for a while.
I'm just welcome. And thanks, guys.
All right, well, with that, we will adjourn the meeting at